I'm Lyndsey Smith with Real Agriculture, and joining me now is Matt Makens with Makens Weather and Cattle Facts. We're in San Antonio, Texas for the NCBA CattleCon. Matt, I would like some good news, but I don't know if I'm going to get it. What can you tell me? Let's start maybe in the West first. For this last half of winter, do we get good news?
Let's go back 1 year when I gave much of Canada very good news. Mm-hmm. And we'll sit there.
No,
we'll sit there. No,
okay,
we'll focus. Okay, things are going to be a little different this year. So very generally speaking, the pattern is flipped. So last year was El Nino. That's a bigger impactor for Western Canada than East. Now we're La Niña, and what does that mean? Okay, it means we get some cold. We felt that cold. But when we get into late spring, early summerish timeline, we're going to dry out faster. So the biggest impact we will feel this year for the next, say, 3 or 4 months is much colder. And then the growing season, we're going to dry out probably too fast in some cases.
Okay, that's not good news, especially for those areas that have really struggled with dryness over the last little while. Some of those areas, though, do have better snowpack now than perhaps they've had for the last while. Does that factor in? Will we hang on to that moisture?
La Niña has always classically been the snow producer for Canada, and it's doing that. It's producing snow. But most of that surplus snow is on the prairies. That ground is frozen solid. When we thaw, most of that water is going to just be runoff. Mountain-wise, we're not as good, and we need that for that stream flow. So it's optimistic for us to look out and be like, hey, we're in a pattern, we're getting snow, we're getting water on the property, but keep in mind, when we start to thaw off, where is that water going? And we have not thawed the ground out.
So staying in the West, certainly one of the conversations here at NCBA is certainly, rebuilding the U.S. cow herd, but Canada falls pretty much in line as well. One of the key factors is maintaining grass and having grass to put those cows on. So what do we have for an outlook on looking past maybe a dry spring?
The positive news here is that last year was pretty good, and we held on to some of that soil moisture. So that's going to give the early growth a bit of a boost, but we have to maintain that. Are we going to get as much June rainfall as we did last year? Probably not. It's going to be much more isolated. Same for July. So the ranges, it's going to absolutely be timing critical on the health of that grass, because it's not going to be as wet as we were last year. So from a grass perspective, expect conditions to be a bit more sluggish this year. From a forage perspective, can we hang on to some wheat and things? We'll see how the winter kill issues were for the barren ground. But that would be another issue, is that winter wheat should be good as long as it survived the cold. And that may be a better boost to the start of the season than, say, the early grasses.
Moving east, where I currently reside, we have differences, certainly. It definitely has felt like a more average winter as far as cold. Snowfall has been, well, I would say below average. That's my sort of anecdotal. Is that set to continue?
Overall, yes. Usually you're going to benefit in the east a little bit better in the spring. You'll get more frequent snows. It'll be a wetter snow variety. This late winter, spring is setting up to be quite mild. You're going to get shots of cold. Don't get me wrong. It's still winter. You're going to get cold times. But by and large, it's a milder pattern that you're in, which will imply perhaps some wetter snows, an earlier start to some greening, and some of that late season moisture. If you're warmer by a few degrees Celsius than average, a lot of that may be beneficial water to the east. So generally speaking, a wetter period for you and a milder period.
All right, so then let's talk about, we are, of course, very far south, but thinking about, the areas of the U.S. that correspond to our Canadian counterparts. Certainly we've been hearing some stories of what condition the winter wheat crop is in here. What is the outlook more generally for, say, the Midwest?
For the next several months, we're still going to have the issue, especially mid-February, and then cycling again sometime in mid-March, where we can have potential cold with winter kill issues on the wheat. Who knows what the last stuff did in January? I mean, we'll find out in March when it starts to perk up again. But we're not getting the snow to cover most of the Midwest to be that protective blanket for it. So the next 6 weeks or so, there's really, honestly, about 2 chances to get some cold down to these places. If they don't materialize, and the odds are not convincing that they will, we're in pretty decent shape. From a grass perspective, most of our feeding country did pretty well from some November and December moisture, so they'll have a good start. We will really have to start to see some concerns, say mid-May into June, and then especially by July, because that'll be a time of year where a lot of moisture runs out for our feeding areas. It will have an impact on central and western corn, and some of those factors. As far as like a drought growth, if you're going to track drought, it's southwestern U.S. now, migrates to the Pacific Northwest, migrates into the Canadian prairies progressively as we go through the next 6 months.
Well, Matt, not the greatest news, but you're a weather person, so we can always hope you're wrong.
And most people usually do hope that I'm wrong and then point that out.
Yeah.
Quite frequently.
All right, Matt, thanks so much.
Yeah, you bet. My pleasure.